This is a gorilla. Your folks are both gorillas. You are a gorilla.
They propose revisions that always seem to involve less respect for the rights of free nations and less freedom for the individual. These matters would be difficult under any circumstances. They are further complicated by a trend in Western countries away from global engagement and democratic confidence. Parts of Europe have developed an identity crisis. We have seen insolvency, economic stagnation, youth unemployment, anger about immigration, resurgent ethno-nationalism, and deep questions about the meaning and durability of the European Union. America is not immune from these trends. In recent decades, public confidence in our institutions has declined. Our governing class has often been paralyzed. The American dream of upward mobility seems out of reach for some who feel left behind in a changing economy. Bigotry seems emboldened. Politics seems more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and outright fabrication.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets.
Now, as you may know, my running mate, Tim, is Catholic and went to Jesuit schools. And one of the things he and I have talked about is this idea from the Jesuits of the Magus, the more, the better.
Hello, everybody. Today is Friday, March 23rd, 2018, and we are gathered here on Skype, Jörg Glissman and myself, Brett Norman, for another reading of Code Word Barbelon. And today we are in page 259, chapter 25, Ruling Through the Bavarian Illuminati. And now we have Jörg Glissman from Belgium. Jörg, how are you doing, brother?
Well, I'm quite fine. Thank you, Brett. I was looking forward to do another session in this wonderful book reading. I'm doing so many book readings for the moment and so many studies, as you probably do too, next to all that work that we have here in the Antichrist system.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that I really took off the last 3 months of that working. I just lived off the money that I made end of last year and beginning of this year, because if I earned more, the taxes would have come and taken it all. And then I said, no, then I'm going to study at home a little bit.
Good,
and that gave me a lot of time to read and produce videos. I produce at least one video every day, but I don't release one video every day, so I have a lot of things to come. And this is a little bit like with this Code Word Barbelon too, because we were recording a lot of these, and you of course have a little bit trouble of keeping up.
Yeah.
But no pressure. Take your time. Eventually it will all come out.
Oh,
and it's most important that we go further in this book, especially with this chapter now, Ruling Through the Bavarian Illuminati. There are so many misunderstandings in the quote-unquote truther world outside there, what the Illuminati are.
Ouch.
So many people.
That's such a painful truth, Jörg. It really is. Very painful.
There are so many people who don't understand that the Illuminati, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, are just another front organization for the Jesuits to hide behind. And we were speaking of that, of course, in this chapter, Behind 1,000 Masks. And
Right.
The Illuminati is only one more mask where they hid behind, And the more masks they invent to hide behind, the more difficult it is for the unlearned student to find them and to get a hold on them and get a check on them,
That's right.
And that's, I read to you yesterday this paper. I'm going to read this now that I found in the Griesinger book. In German, it's a poem.
Please,
It's
go right
about
ahead, Jörg.
it's about the motto of the Jesuits. And I sent that to you, Brett, and maybe in the future you will have the time to work that also into a poem in English.
Mm-hmm.
So in German, it's a poem, but I'm not going to read the German one. I'm going to read the English translation that I just easily did with Google Translate. And it's about the motto of the Jesuits. Just to get the viewer of this video, our listeners and viewers, in the mood of the coming reading of the ruling through the Bavarian Illuminati, that with this few sentences they get again a short but comprehensive understanding of what the Jesuits are. This is the Jesuits' motto, taken from a flyer from the 17th century. And I'm sorry, it's not in poem version, but still it will probably get your attention. I am a warrior's daughter born under arms. That's why I swore pity, eternal hatred. Soldier's wrath I sucked from the mother's breast. That's why murder and bloodshed is my eye's lust. The camp was the breeding champion of my youth. So what do I know about law and other virtue? Robbing and plundering is a warrior's pastime. Who resists, you stab the dagger in the body. I know no other God but my own will. With fire and sword I thus quench my ambition. Dare you, fool, oppose me, and if you were a king, I'll put you down. And does not help violence, so helps ruse. And I place myself as if I were the best Christian. In hypocrisy, I'm a master. I'm cheating even the devil. And my worst lie is that I call myself Society of Jesus, Jesus Fighter. Because of Jesus, I only have the name, nothing else. And this is a quite powerful understanding to understand what the Jesuit really is. And he has nothing else in common with Jesus but the name that he takes from our Lord and Savior. And with that, I will start reading on page 259, chapter 25, Ruling Through the Bavarian Illuminati. It is interesting, of course, that P.D. Stewart calls this chapter Ruling Through the Bavarian Illuminati, by that giving a place to the fact that there were other Illuminatis also. And we were speaking about those, I think, already earlier in this book. I don't remember what we all spoke about in this book because I'm reading so many books. But we know that when Ignatius Loyola came from Spain, and that he was there part of the Los Alumbrados, which is also a illuminated society, that comes from Spain in the 15th century.
Right.
So therefore, the author is making a distinguishing. How do you call it?
Distinction, maybe?
Yeah, he distinguishes between the Bavarian and maybe even other Illuminatis. Yeah, and the Bavarian Illuminati are those who are most known. I guess that not from 100 people who know something about the Illuminati, there are not 90 who have any knowledge about Los Alumbrados. But they all know the Bavarian Illuminati. Anyway, we read from Sun Tzu, The Art of War, a little quote, and I want to remind the listener who did not maybe watch that part of our book reading, where I explained to you that Sun Tzu was a Chinese general, so-called Chinese general, and the book of his book, The Art of War, was translated by the Jesuit Amiot in 1772 with the consent and the allowance of the general of the Society of Jesus at that time, Lorenzo Ricci, just 1 year before the Jesuit order was banned. So, to me, it is no coincidence. There are no coincidences, by the way, but it's absolutely not a coincidence that this book, The Art of War, translated by Amiot, a Jesuit, 1 year before the banishment of the Society of Jesus, gives us a deep insight into the warfare of the Jesuits, because everything that the Jesuits do is written down in Sun Tzu's Art of War. But, again, this is another example, as what Tapasauci calls in his book, a blown cover as cover. The quote is as follows: "The general will know how to shape at will not only the army he is commanding, but also that of his enemies." Unquote. It is the 18th century, and the Jesuits have launched a massive salvo, their most audacious campaign yet for world domination. May 1st, 1776, a high satanic holiday, was the beginning of a new phase for the Roman Catholic Church, a phase that would have reverberations around the world for decades to come. On that date, a German Jesuit by the name of Dr. Adam Weishaupt founded a secret revolutionary society called the Illuminatenorden, or Orders of the Illuminati, based at the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria, Germany, and patterned after the model of the Jesuit order. Weishaupt adopted the codename Spartacus after a slave who led an uprising against the Roman legions. Prior to their suppression in 1773, the degree of power that the members of the Society of Jesus had attained in the German state of Bavaria was almost absolute. It was by them that the majority of the Bavarian colleges were founded, and it was by them they were controlled. And so it is not surprising that they would use their most renowned university to launch their comeback. It is a fact that even before the Pope canonically restored the Jesuits in 1814, the Society of Jesus had already been scheming a return to power. As indicated above, the date of the Illuminati's launch appears to have occult significance, as May 1st is the satanic holy Sabbath called Beltane, one of the most important nights of the satanic calendar, when a human sacrifice is required in mockery of the death of Jesus Christ. The founder of the Illuminati was born the son of a Jewish rabbi on February 6, 1748. He was made to convert to Catholicism in 1753, the year his father died, when he was adopted by his godfather, Baron Johann Adam von Ickstadt, a director at the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt. It's interesting, I have to make a little comment here. It's interesting that we read here about Johann Adam von Ickstadt, because I just made a video in German about if the Islam belongs to Germany. And the German minister of state, is it I guess Seehofer, made a few days ago a statement that the Islam does not belong to Germany, and that he was going against what former German President Wolf said, Islam belongs to Germany, and what Merkel says all the time, the Chancellor, that Islam belongs to Germany. Now, what has this to do with Johann Adam von Ickstadt? I'm going to tell you in a second. Wait for it. Wait for it. This Seehofer was born in Ingolstadt, and he went to a all-boys school, and that is named after Johann Adam from Ickstadt. And in the official papers that I was looking up in the internet, doing a little research before I did that video, it seemed that this Adam from Ickstadt was against the Jesuits. And now I read here that Baron Johann Adam von Ickstadt was a director of the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt. So how can a director of the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt all of a sudden become a opponent of the Jesuits? I think.
Well, that's pretty easy, isn't it? If we know the Jesuit oath.
Yeah, of course. But therefore, not everything that you find online when you do research is really the truth.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You got that right. There's a lot more detail to it.
Yeah, and I was really looking for that, and I thought this Seehofer, this guy, he must have Jesuit connections.
Yeah,
because he was Catholic born and raised. He comes from Bavaria. He was how do you call that? He was president of the CSU, that is the Christian Socialist Union, the Bavarian part of the CDU, the party of what Angela Merkel is the chancellor in all of Germany. But that party has a different section when it comes to Bavaria. All over Germany, you have the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, Christlich-Demokratische Union. But only in Bavaria, you have the Christlich-Soziale Union, the CSU. So there, the CDU doesn't even appear. That is another name, another party. And he was the chief of that party for many years. Yeah? And nobody's going to tell me that someone who is the chief of the Christian, which actually means, of course, Catholic Socialist Union in Bavaria,
right,
is not Jesuit trained, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
So now P.D. Stewart gives me here the information that Baron Johann Adam von Eichstätt was a director at the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt. Therefore, he was a Jesuit, and therefore you have the Jesuit connections to Horst Seehofer. Interesting. Well, you know, this is how I learn when I read books like this.
Mm-hmm. You bet.
The Young Orphans Education, still speaking about Adam Weishaupt, was thereafter entrusted to the care of the Jesuits of that, quote-unquote, I say, great university. Of a brilliant mind and being well trained in the Jesuit arts of equivocation and probabilism, Weishaupt, at the age of just 25 years, was promoted to the prestigious position of Professor of Canon Law. Imagine today, dear listener, when you come to a university and there is a professor teaching you who is just 25 years old. Some students are older than that professor.
Mm-hmm.
As the favored protege of von Eichstätt, he would later become professor of moral theology at Ingolstadt, which university had a long tradition in that dangerous and pernicious subject. The reader will notice that I have referred to Weishaupt as a Jesuit rather than an ex-Jesuit, which is how most historians and commentators label him. That, of course, has long been the accepted view. But in this chapter, I would like to proffer an alternative perspective, one that will explain a lot of what has mystified the historians and commentators alike. I wish to propose a radically different hypothesis altogether, which is simply this: that Weishaupt, for all his public attacks on the Jesuits, never left the order. In fact, Weishaupt was merely a talisman. I said Weishaupt remained a Jesuit for the following cogent reasons. Firstly, the term ex-Jesuit is misleading, as all Jesuits after 1773 were called ex-Jesuits, since no Jesuit was allowed to openly act as such following the decree of suppression. At the time of Weishaupt revived the Illuminati, the Jesuits had only recently been banned from teaching, and all their colleges were taken over under the famous bull, or breve, of Antichrist Pope Clement XIV, you know, Dominic ac Redemptor. We spoke about that.
That's right.
Dominus ac Redemptor. Even in Germany, where the Jesuits were for a time permitted to teach, they were only allowed to do so as subordinates and not as superiors. Thus, in order to retain his professorship at Ingolstadt, Weishaupt declared himself as having left the Jesuit order. In other words, to keep his prestigious job, Weishaupt disowned his allegiance to the Jesuits. Now, the official yarn given about this is that the Jesuits were sorely offended with Weishaupt following his appointment as professor of civil law at Ingolstadt in 1772, before they were even oppressed, and more so by his later appointment as professor of canon law in 1773, the very year the Jesuit order had been banned. Incredibly, it is said that for these trifling reasons, he got into a quarrel with the Jesuits and thereafter left the order, renouncing his oath and vows, and thus becoming their bitterest enemy, as Professor Robinson declares. However, notwithstanding my indebtedness to and respect for the research of Professor Robinson, his analysis on this one point is, in my opinion, much too simple and does not reconcile with the facts. That Weishaupt, who every credible historian admits was not only educated as a Jesuit priest, but actually founded his Illuminati order after the hierarchical model of the Society of Jesus, meaning their constitutions, would then become their bitterest enemy simply on account of some fallout over his professorship at Ingolstadt, seems to me to be quite ludicrous. Had Weishaupt really hated the Jesuits that much, he would not have used their constitutions, which are the essence of Jesuitism. The Encyclopaedia Britannica, volume 11 of the 1970 edition, page 1096, confirms that the Illuminati were, quote, organized along Jesuit lines, unquote. Additionally, we know that, quote, Weishaupt entered into an intrigue with the Jesuit Professor Stadler to obtain a coveted ecclesiastical position for the latter, unquote. Further, Weishaupt did not leave the Jesuit order, as the order did not officially exist. It had already been banned in 1773, and the Jesuit general was in prison. Well, that's what they tell you. We spoke about that. Resulting in a sharp setback for their policies. So there was nothing to leave as such. There was nothing to leave as such. I have to read it this way. In any event, one would have thought that the appointment of one of their brethren should have been a cause for rejoicing, that a member of their order was still allowed to teach at a time when the order itself was officially banned from doing so. Moreover, the Catholic Online Encyclopedia confirms that even after the order was suppressed, quote, some of the ex-Jesuits retained their professorships for a while longer, unquote. Yet, we are not told that any of these other quote-unquote ex-Jesuits got into quarrels with their former order or became the enemies of the society. Thus, the idea of them being angry at Weishaupt for continuing as a professor at Ingolstadt, resulting in bitterness between them and him, is just too simplistic and incredulous to my mind, P.D. Stewart says, and I do fully agree. And I guess Brett also joins in with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In fact, Ingolstadt was founded by Peter de Hont, or Peter Canisius, who lived between 1521 and 1597, the first German Jesuit. Yeah, and I wrote about that in Theodor Griesinger's book, an interesting book. I can tell you to look that up when you want to read about the founding of the Jesuit order and the years of Loyola as general. You learn very, very much. And this Peter Canisius was sent along with another second one, I don't remember his name right now, sent to Germany, to the stronghold of Protestantism at that time. And the Jesuits had held virtually all professorships there for over 90 years. That's for more than 3 generations, people. In 1688, teaching in the Faculty of Philosophy at Ingolstadt passed entirely into the hands of the Jesuit professors. Weishaupt was made a professor there in 1772, before the Jesuits were banned in 1773. Thus, there was no reason whatsoever for any ill feelings over Weishaupt's appointment, since he was already professor in 1772. Even more ridiculous is the proposition that merely on account of his pretty and puerile quarrel, which claim we have already debunked, and for no other reason, Weishaupt not only came to hate the Jesuits, but more. He now sought for no apparent reason to destroy his own church. How could Weishaupt even imagine that with a few friends, if the official story is to be believed, he would possibly overturn the mighty Catholic Church? This is more than David against Goliath. We must also ask why a well-to-do professor with everything going for him, apart from his alleged fallout with the Jesuits, would not only attack the Jesuits, but would suddenly turn against his church and also against the whole world, devising a plan to overturn, quote, all governments and establishments, unquote. Only a deranged individual would dream up such a grand and vengeful plan for no greater reason than a dispute with his former brethren over an appointment as a professor at Ingolstadt University. On the contrary, the very fact that he now hated his church is consistent with him remaining a member of an underground Jesuit movement rather than their enemy. as the Jesuits had every reason to hate and revenge the Catholic Church, having been disbanded and suppressed in 1773 by the decree of Antichrist Pope Clement XIV. Next, we must consider that despite his brilliance, at the time he founded the Illuminati, Weishaupt was just 28 years old. Now, the intelligent reader will at once appreciate that Weishaupt, although a professor of law, could hardly have been the supremo behind this powerful order, as so many historians have naively suggested. Other curious fact is that on February 15, 1775, Cardinal Braschi was elected Pope Pius VI. Didn't we speak about that in one of the last broadcasts,
Yeah, I
Brett?
think so.
That I told
Yeah,
you
this
that
is ringing a bell.
there was this underground connection, this tunnel between Castello Gandolfo, where Lorenzo Ricci was put into prison in Rome,
Cool.
and that he met with Cardinal Braschi, who was the exchequer of the church at the time, meaning he took care of all the money business. That's what Tapasauci wrote in the book Rulers of Evil, a very, very interesting chapter, the death and resurrection of Lorenzo Ricci. When you get to that book, Rulers of Evil, read that. That is a wonderful chapter and gives you much more insight into the Cardinal Braschi story, as P.D. Stewart writes here about. And I told you that this was the abbreviation that was painted on the walls in the Vatican, SSCV, Sarda Sede Vacante, in September Sarda Sede Vacante, SSVC. SSSVC, sorry, SSSVC, September Sarda Sede Vacante. That means that the papal chair will be empty in September. That was dooming over Pope Clement XIV, so he knew that he would die. And then we had a time of more than 130 days before the next pope was initiated, and that is Cardinal Braschi, who was a child of Lorenzo Ricci all along, and he was elected Pope Pius VI on February 15th in 1775. This Pius, you see, the date of when Pope Clement XV died in 1774, that was somewhere in October, right? Or September. So all the time between the month September in 1774 and the 15th of February in 1775, there was no pope. So that's October, November, December, January, February. That's even more than 5 months. Huh? But okay, getting back to the book here.
Oh, you're I just got to quick say, I always get so confused with these names and numbers, names and numbers of the popes, because they're just, the devil really likes to confuse us, doesn't he?
Yeah, the problem is that the Pope has a name as a Pope, and he also has a secular name, like Cardinal Braschi has his secular name is Braschi, and his quote-unquote church name is Pope Pius VI. So, yeah, you always have to keep two names in mind when you want to know a
it's
Pope.
interesting because I was talking with this friend of mine the other day. This friend lives in this town here in Minnesota called St. Cloud, and in St. Cloud is another town called St. Joseph, and in St. Joseph was this town where they were talking about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln before it even happened. Remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and this friend of mine, recently, he had some friend that was Catholic, and he was just appalled by how they will not accept the same Bible, Jörg. This our King James Bible, our Textus Receptus Bible, is so different than every other Bible. And when you point
that's because
something
the truth
out,
is so much different from the lie.
Yeah, when you point something out to a Catholic, typically they will go to their what do you call that? Official sources. Well, I've got to consult my got to go consult my professor here and see what your argument is. and look it up in the canons or whatever, and they just can't have any faith in a Textus Receptus. Are you kidding? So yeah, it's really something when you start to learn that, and then you start to learn, okay, well, what's this history all about? And I was telling him, with history, it's like you're almost, it's like we're like a tuning fork, and we're tuned to different frequency, and when we study this history, we have to retune everything. It's like, wait a second, I thought I thought that this word had this meaning, but when you study history, it doesn't. It's changed.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
true.
I mean, it just throws the whole thing out of whack,
Mhm.
And I guess that's part of the whole process. But anyway, I just want to say a quick word about it.
Oh, that's all right. When we finish this little paragraph, I still have to make another comment on this, because I think even here,
Please.
also P.D. Stewart has to understand the Jesuit deception in this. So another curious fact is that on February 15th in 1775, Cardinal Braschi was elected Pope, Pius VI. This Pius was a former pupil of the Jesuits, and he desired the release of Father Ricci, the Jesuit general, and his fellow Jesuits from the prison in Castel Sant'Angelo. But Charles III of Spain insisted on their detention. Weishaupt's order was formed on May 1st, 1776, a little over a year after Charles' refusal. Now, you're gonna tell me that all of a sudden that this Charles III, the King of Spain, has power to say what is to do with the Jesuit general or not? Are you kidding me? This is just another spin of the game they are playing, Let the King of Spain, let Charles I be insisting on the detention of the Jesuits. Let that officially be, but behind the scenes they all play another game. And Lorenzo Ricci was set free at that time because we know that he was in the United States of America at the time of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Yeah, we know that because it is recorded in a book, Our Flag, I think it is called, where he is mentioned as the professor, and other sources. So you are going to tell me, when I read this book and I don't have a deeper understanding of this, that because Charles III of Spain insisted on their detention, that therefore he was really taken into detention all the time? No, he was not, because when Weishaupt's order was formed on May 1st, 1776, the Jesuits had all the important positions in that order positioned, They just took over because it was there. It was another mask to hide behind, as we read in this other chapter, behind 1,000 masks. It's just another mask. So the official teaching, of course, is that the King of Spain, Charles III, insisted on their detention. That's true. But do you really think that when we go back into the papal bull of 1543, Injunctum Nobis, where it is stated that the general has even power to revoke any order from the White Pope, that he doesn't have any power over a Spanish king? So one thing, and that's the point that I want to make, I hope you understand this. One thing is the official teaching that we read here. Charles III insisted on their detention. Okay, hey, the king says that, so then it's done. But we know that the king has nothing to say. He was just playing a role. And his role playing was at that moment to say, no, the Jesuit general and the Jesuits that are in Castello Gandolfo or Castel Sant'Angelo have to be put into prison and stay there. That's the official story. But behind the scenes, something completely different was playing. And that's what you have to understand when you read this book. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
We must also ask if Weishaupt was so anti-Pope and hated the Catholic Church that much. Why was it that when Weishaupt was at last laid to rest, he was given a full Catholic burial. For all his purported plans to bring about the destruction of the Catholic Church and the public condemnation of his order by Pope Pius VI, Weishaupt was never excommunicated from the Catholic Church, like Adolf Hitler. In fact, on the contrary, at his death on November 18, 1830, the Catholic Church proudly claimed Weishaupt as her faithful son, saying that he had been, quote, reconciled with the Catholic Church, which, as a youthful professor, he had doomed to death and destruction, unquote. This late-life reconciliation to the Catholic Church and the lack of any steps taken to excommunicate a man whose alleged lifelong mission was, quote, the destruction of the Catholic Church, unquote, speaks for itself. And I don't have to add any comment to this. By their fruits you will know them. So when we have the official teaching of that the Spanish king Charles III insisted on their detention, we know that the professor made his appearance in the United States of America at the time of the Declaration of Independence. So by their fruits you will know them, not by their official teaching, but by their fruits. And that's the same with Adam Weishaupt right here. It is even admitted, continues P.D. Stewart in the book, that Weishaupt, before his death, became a zealous supporter of and helped build up the Catholic Church in Gotha. So says the Chronicle of the Catholic Parish in Gotha, Germany. Weishaupt served his church well. I'd say he served the devil well.
Yeah.
See, reader, how ludicrous the whole matter appears when analyzed but a little. Indeed, the Catholic Encyclopedia, under the heading Illuminati, makes this fascinating admission, quote, for this prototype, he, Weishaupt, relied mainly on Freemasonry, in accordance with which he modeled the degrees and ceremonial rites of his order, after the pattern of the Society of Jesus, though distorting to the point of caricature its essential features, he built up the strictly hierarchical organization of his society, unquote. To hide its essential Jesuit nature, no doubt. In other words, when the Jesuit imago was suppressed in 1773, the Illuminati order became the chrysalis for a new, more virulent form of Jesuitism, the pseudo-metamorphosis. I hope I didn't butcher that word.
It's
Pseudo-metamorphosis.
Yeah, it's a metamorphosis.
It's a metamorphosis. Yeah. But perhaps the strongest proof that Weishaupt was a Jesuit throughout the suppression comes from his main collaborator and closest associate, the influential Freemason and lawyer Baron Knigge, who on April 20th, 1784, resigned from the Illuminati convinced of Weishaupt's Jesuitism, accusing him of being a Jesuit in disguise. I don't think that you guys over there in the United States of America have any idea who Baron Knigge is. But Knigge is the one that we always use when you how I'm going to explain that. When you want to teach people manners, table manners and behaving manners, like the man opens the door for the woman, the man tracks out the chair for the woman to sit down when you go to sit, and how to hold your fork and how to hold your knife, and sneezing in public and all that stuff, all these behavior rules. We have a book that is written by this Baron von Knigge. Yeah, that's why everybody in Germany knows Knigge, because Knigge has become the name has become an equivalent for good behavior. You know?
Kidding.
Oh, that's not in the Knigge, So that's a very, very famous person in Germany. And that is probably something that you in America have no idea of. Yeah?
No.
And this Knigge, I knew, was a Jesuit. He was a Jesuit, and he was the closest associate and an influential Freemason. And he was not only a Freemason, he was also a Jesuit. I tell you this right now. Who resigned from the Illuminati convinced of Weishaupt Jesuitism, accusing him of being a Jesuit in disguise. Yeah, the pot calling the kettle black, eh?
Yeah, that's right.
Indeed, Weishaupt wrote, quote, "Behold our secret, the end justifies the means." And no marvel, for the Jesuits also have as their first and greatest motto, the end justifies the means. Tapasauci, in his work Rulers of Evil, also expresses the view that the founder of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, was under orders from the Jesuit general Lorenzo Ricci. The author of that book does not give the same reasons I have, yet it was encouraging to see that someone else had decided to think for themselves and not simply accept the official mantra on so important a historical development. Isn't this a wonderful proof of everything that I said of Rulers of Evil during the explanation and reading of this book, Code Word Babylon, already?
Wow. Well, Jörg, I'm going to have to request that we close the
No, you
session
don't
up
have to
in a little
request.
bit.
I know that.
Good.
That's why we come to the end. I held an eye on
I'm
the
sorry.
on the clock. No
Good.
problem. When
I
it
could
comes
tell.
to the reform of an older order and all that other stuff in this subject, in this chapter, we are going still for a few pages along. That will be for a next reading of Cold War Babylon. This was maybe a short video, only a little bit about 40 minutes, but I think this was information packed, and maybe you have to even watch it again to get a full and deep understanding of the facts we presented to you with this part of Code Word Babylon that we just read in chapter 25, ruling through the Bavarian Illuminati and learning things about Adam Weishaupt that you probably have never ever heard before. With this, I'm going to say thank you very much, Brett, for the invitation, and for the viewers and listeners out there, thanks for watching and listening and commenting, and until next time, God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Jörg, for your commitment to reading these books and giving us some insights into the wow, we did quite a few pages in such a short period of time, and it would be wonderful to discuss more, but I got to run to work here. But it's good nonetheless to get started in this book again, do some more readings here, and we'll try and get back on the stick here and get further into the book very soon. And I appreciate everyone for stopping by and listening in and making comments, and looking forward to next time. See you then. Bye-bye.
That for the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control a million people, literally, it was easier to control a million people than physically to kill a million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill a million people than to control a million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict. And I believe that we've come horribly off track in the years since the fall of the Soviet Union. And we're starting now in the 21st century, which I believe strongly is a crisis both of our church, a crisis of our faith, a crisis of the West, and a crisis of capitalism.
His son Jesus is here in our midst. His bride, the church, is honored to host an event affirming the dignity of the human person and the sacredness of all human life.
I think Russia is no longer a communist state, first of all. That's very important to realize. It hasn't yet defined itself, however, effectively as a democracy. It is still uncertain.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict, of which if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, to really be able to not just stand with our beliefs, but to fight for our beliefs against this new barbarity that's starting, that we will literally eradicate everything that we've been bequeathed over the last 2,025 years.
You didn't mention the president by name, but it was hard not to conclude that that's who you were referring to. Is that fair?
I was certainly referring to the threats that we are now facing with this stated goals of this administration, which would upset the last 70 years of a new world order, which was established after World War II. 70 years based on human rights, respect for the law, free trade, all of the things, aspects of this world order that took place after one of the most horrific, terrible wars in history, and I'm for maintaining it.
We are grateful to be citizens of one nation under God, who acclaim this evening that in God we trust. Bless our two candidates, our benefactors, and those whom the L. Smith Foundation has been honored to serve for 7 decades. Guide us safely home, both this evening and for all eternity, through Christ our Lord. Amen.